Well, hello again everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube video channel where we continue to explore examples of vintage off-road motorcycles in the continuing series of my world of classic dirt bike videos. Now this time round we're going to take a brief look at another European classic, a 1990 CZ 125 Evolution bike. Now this featured machine is another bike from the same personal private collector who owns the 1977 Michael 250 I featured earlier on my channel. Now the collector has many of these hidden gems locked away in his workshop, and I was very lucky really to catch these pictures and a few video clips of the bike when he rolled it out into the daylight for the very first time. Now this particular bike has never ever been raced on a racetrack, and this bike was bought many years ago and then was just almost immediately put into storage, where it has been lying for many years. Now without question this is almost definitely still a 100% original machine and still sports all of its original parts from when it was brand new. But basically these 1990 125s were the last ditch attempt for the CZ factory to take on the rest of the European and Japanese manufacturers on the racetrack. But this little bike in fact just came too little, too late. Now of course the bike is a 1990 CZ 125 Evolution machine which was designated the 519 model type. Now with regards to the motor, these 519 125 bikes of course had a single cylinder water cooled two-stroke motor with one of these very unique exhaust power valves, which of course were all the rage during the 1990s. Now the motor reputedly kicked out about 34 brake horsepower. Now the fueling was controlled by a 38mm Mikuni TMS carburetor, which was good enough to keep that little 125cc mill spinning quite happily. Now electronic ignition of course on this bike, which was of course of the PAL Magneton type. Now the motor also had a 6-speed gearbox, which was enough to get the bike along the track at a decent rate, and this was also complemented by the wet multi-plate clutch. Now the bike had a set of Hydra pneumatic forks which were utilised as the bike's front suspension, which were of course oil and spring damped with the addition of air that could be added as per many of the other manufacturers that were using at the time. Now the actual travel length of the front forks were about 12 inches, which was quite a substantial amount for that year. Now a single rear monoshock on the back of the bike, which was standard rear suspension of all these bikes from the early 1990s period, and this of course again was fully adjustable for compression and dampening. Now although the bike had a chrome moly steel chassis, the swing arm was of course made of alloy, which also was in line with many of the other manufacturers of its time. And the alloy swing arm of course was another weight saving device for this bike. Now, modern style disc brakes of course on this bike, on the front and the rear, with a 240mm disc on the front and a 120mm disc on the rear. And by all accounts these brakes were good enough to stop the little 125 in its tracks whenever they were required. Now of course the bike still has all of its original plastics. As you can see here, it still has the original rear mudguard with the CZ badge stamped on. And the bike still has all its original levers, cables and throttle gasser. And this particular bike has not seen any real racing action on the track, and hence the bike's good original condition. Now this 1990 bike is still using a tubular chrome moly steel chassis with that rear alloy swing arm. Now of course many of the big manufacturers at this time were still using steel chassis and all of them would then soon change over to the aluminium chassis as the metal of choice for their future off-road machines. Now our bike is still sporting its original exhaust system and tailpipe, and as you can see on the front pipe there is very little in the way of dings and dents on this bike due to the very limited action this bike has seen. Now of course a plastic airbox and air intake pipe on this bike, which of course was specifically manufactured for this 1990 machine. A very substantial air intake into that massive carburetor. Now the fuel tank once again was of course made of plastic and could hold about 8 litres of fuel at a fill, which was more than adequate for any length of race moto. Now this 1990 model CZ had a really comfortable seat and had ample cushioning for a rider even on the bumpiest tracks. But of course just about every motocross manufacturer at this time was fitting these type of seats, which continued across the top of the gas tank to enable the rider to move his weight from the back of the bike and to the front as required. But let's not forget, in their heydays of the 1960s and 70s, CZ had many innovative ideas of their own for off-road machines, and CZ were in fact one of the very first motorcycle companies to use expansion chambers on their off-road bikes, and this radical innovation idea was almost immediately then copied by the big 4 Japanese manufacturers. So anyway, there you have it, a very brief look at a very rare European machine, a 1990 CZ 125. Now I know my YouTubers continually ask me to hear the bikes running after a video, and believe me, on the day I took these video clips and pictures we did our very best to try and fire the bike up, but our best efforts were for nothing in the end, as the little CZ flatly refused to fire into life. Now, as you can see, my humble assistant James here is doing his best to get the bike to go, but I think it's because the bike had been lying in storage for so long it was going to need some mechanical attention before it would again fire up. So look out for many more of these classic dirt bikes coming to my YouTube channel very soon, so please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like what you see, and once again, thank you very much for watching.